Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, unlike mainstream media beholden to corporations, we only owe allegiance to you. Remember, you can also send me a tweet at EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right. Well, folks, welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Willies, your host. Thank you so kindly for being here with us today. We are going to have a great show for you as usual, and I hope you are all ready. For those of you who are on YouTube already, please go ahead and remember what we say. Give us that thumbs up. Give us that thumbs up. And if you are on Facebook or Twitch, give us that like. Make sure that people sees us. And remember, some of these shows appear on KPFT 90.1 FM Houston. So we get a good segment out of here. You know where to find it. Anyway, we are going to have a great show for you today. What is the show going to be about today? I tell you what, as we speak, I'm bringing it up on the other screen. So bear with me as I get that going. As you know, it's always like with this new time, it is always like trying to get all these pieces ready to go. May Wood, here you are. I've been trying to find you. Yes, May, thank you for being here with us. We couldn't do this without you. So thank you very much for being here. I'm trying to get the show of the day up on the screen right now. And you know what? I think I've got it. I think I have got it. Let me go ahead and make some modifications. I don't want us to be live on that secondary screen because it used quite a bit of resources. There we go. Anyhow, title of the show today, here is the actual human cost of gentrification. Also, Texas is trying to revise history. Maywood says, hello from Long Beach, California. Maywood also says, I was trying to figure out the time backwards. Yeah, it is noon Eastern, 11 Central, 10 Mountain, 9 Pacific. 1, 2, 3, well, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's what we're talking about. Anyway, so the title of the show, community activist and real estate expert Robby Caban co-hosts Politics Done Right as she interviews writer, lawyer, and community organizer Kamal Franklin. We discuss gentrification and its cost in a manner that all can understand. It all very intriguing conversation that will make you think. Secondly, caught on tape. Texas administrator heard forcing teachers to teach an alternative form of history. So we're going to cover that as well. So folks, we're going to go ahead and get started real quickly since the interview is a bit long. So we're going to go ahead and start with the interview and then we'll take it on the other side. So here we go.
Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am Robby Caban, and today I'll be co-hosting with your normal host, Egberto Willies. We have a special guest. I'm very excited. Egberto?
Look, thank you so kindly for being here with us. Robby, you always bring us great personalities as you've done with us in the past, and it is my honor to have you hosting Politics Done Right today.
So let's get right into it. Thank you. So we have with us Kamal Franklin of Atlanta, Georgia, who is a founder of the Community Movement Builders. He is an organizer and activist. He's also a media specialist as well, and he's an attorney. And we're going to be asking him basically exactly what him and his body of work is and what his organization does. They are centralized in Pittsburgh, Atlanta, which is on the south side in Southwest Atlanta, where I'm a resident as well. So Kamal, thank you for joining us. And how long have you been organizing, doing the work, and in Pittsburgh with Community Movement Builders?
Well, one, thank you for having me. I really appreciate you sharing your platform. We've been in the Pittsburgh neighborhood as an organization since 2015. where we purchased a community house and started doing our organizing and activism work. That particular neighborhood that you're talking about, Pittsburgh, is a neighborhood that was founded approximately, I think, in 1883 by formerly enslaved Africans as a settlement post-slavery. And since that time period up to today, it's been a vast majority Black community, a working class Black community. But like all communities in Atlanta, it is under the threat of gentrification. It is under the threat of displacement for working class folks. Atlanta, again, like a lot of cities across the country, is experiencing this tremendous growth in corporate development and new housing that's being built for middle class and upper middle class people, which is slowly pushing out working class and poor people from major cities.
Thank you so much for the background on it. That was actually a lot of information really condensed, but I think it's particularly relevant, and why I understand why you said so, that this is a historically Black working class neighborhood in Atlanta called Pittsburgh. So it's especially heart-wrenching to see what's occurring. As you know, I'm in real estate, so I've been watching these circumstances. So I'm really grateful that there are boots on the ground like your organization, not only organizing people, but your media, Black Power Media, out there on podcasts, educating. I guess two things. So you mentioned you purchased a community house. So a lot of people get a little caught up. At least that's what my interpretation is. They think, well, you purchased a house. What's wrong? Why shouldn't I purchase a house? Can you explain, elaborate a little bit? Of course, I have my own viewpoint. I don't think we should be gaining wealth off the backs of poor people. That's my problem with it. I don't care if you gain wealth. In fact, I help people to gain wealth. But can you elaborate a little bit on that? Because maybe that'll help some folks cross over and leave the dark side.
Well, no, I mean, I think it's important to talk about the idea and the issue of gentrification, particularly through a lens of what drives it, right? And what drives gentrification is city policy mixed with development and developers, particularly real estate developers, who begin to target particular communities for change, right? And usually those are communities that don't have a lot of power. They obviously don't have a lot of wealth. The residents are mostly poor or working class people. In fact, one of the misnomers is that most people think that in these neighborhoods, folks are owners of their property, but most of these folks in Pittsburgh and other places are renters. So they're impacted not only by the value of homes going up, but also the value of the taxes on those homes going up, which in turn either force and or make landlords, owners of the property, raise rents, right? Or those who are working class owners now who believe that they're in a position that they've created wealth, they now have to worry about larger tax bills that didn't have to worry about. And then in addition to that, usually when someone is selling a property in a working class neighborhood, and maybe they purchased a property 7, 8, 15 years ago for like 80,000, 90,000. And so now they're selling it for 200,000, 210,000. Obviously that's a great windfall for somebody. No one begrudges that. The issue also becomes that even once you sell your property, you're no longer in a position to stay in the city. So you now have to move out further, usually from your job, usually from social services, usually from public transportation, usually from social networks that you've had all your life, because even though you've gotten a good windfall of cash, that new money only affords property that's outside the city limits, because so much other gentrification has happened in the city, which doesn't allow you to stay in that same place that you were, unless you are willing to settle for like buying a condo, which is less space, but probably the same amount of money that you paid for your house 10 or 15 years ago. So our community house that we purchased through some donations really is about giving us an opportunity to talk, work with, have a conversation with our neighbors, with other people in the neighborhood about that issue of gentrification, about policing, about wealth value, so that we can have conversations with folks and be very clear. So we're not here to tell you not to necessarily sell your house at a profit, but we are here to tell you that to stabilize a community and to stop it from gentrifying, certain things have to take place, right? So you have to think about alternatives to just market-based housing as a way in which people gain generational wealth. You have to think about land trust. You have to think about keeping your homes. You have to think about challenging people on the neighborhood association or challenging city councils around how development happens in your community, because a lot of times this development happens and most of the folks who live, whether renters or owners, have very little say in what development actually happens in their neighborhoods and in their communities. And so once somebody decides that they're going to put a big box store or something, or big townhomes, or some developer decides they're going to put 500, 600,000 homes in those communities, that automatically has this reverberation, which causes housing prices to go up again, rents to go up, and taxes to go up. And now you're forced to deal with it. So we have to flip that power dynamic and have residents themselves have much more say in what comes into their neighborhoods, because everybody wants to benefit from a certain kind of development. But what people do not need or do not want is gentrification, which drives people from their homes and from their places where they've lived the majority of their lives.
You know, I've been contemplating these circumstances that are so specific in this conversation, this dialogue with your organization, Community Movement Builders, and your Black Power Media. And your focus is Atlanta and the South Side. And I get it, because I remember when I first arrived in Atlanta, driving through downtown, seeing the So Deaf mural. And it was one of the first cities that I ever felt that was a, you know, quote unquote Mecca for specifically Black people and people of color. It is unique in that regard. So I think there's something about that. However, we all know that there's housing problems all over the country. So apparently, you know, this private interest in real estate, which is kind of my wheelhouse, is pervasive. But you bring up some really crucial points, and Egberto obviously covers national and global, so this is very relevant. These days, I've been thinking about the especially with it recently being Indigenous Peoples Day, the term gentrification is really just the new gentrifiers in 2020 are just the old colonizers. This is really not a new concept. You know, it's what did colonizers do? Come in, take over, you know, usurp the resources and get rid of the indigenous people. You know, what do gentrifiers do? Come in, usurp the resources, take over via the civic engagement you're talking about, and get rid of the indigenous people.
I just love the way you articulate that. I've been talking gentrification and I never quite put it that way. That is going to be a new concept that I have to use. But Robby, if you'd let me, I want to address something that Mr. Franklin said, and specifically when he talked about people coming into the neighborhood. I read recently that there are corporations that are coming into neighborhoods and buying a whole swath of homes, modifying them and then selling them out. And that seems somehow like an encroachment on a sector that they shouldn't have rights on. Is that the way it should be, Mr. Franklin? And I know, Robby, you are also the real estate agent. What would that, would that entail, preventing corporations from doing something like that?
Well, what's interesting is, when we talk about the housing crisis, right, and the Great Recession, obviously one of the main drivers was the securitization of loans, right? Loans were brought up by these large corporations. They were made into securities, and then people's mortgages basically were used to pay off bonds and so forth, right? And when that game collapsed, the market and these corporations reinstitutionalized. So and there became some laws that stopped them from doing it as directly as they did it before. And so one of the ways in which they picked back up on that, companies like BlackRock and several others, was that they started buying houses, right, which usually were rental houses, and then they started securitizing rents, right? So sometimes they wouldn't sell them, they would hold them. And now rents became the way in which they would use for bonds and so forth. And so that's part of what's happening now too, is that these large corporations, multi-billion-dollar corporations, are now buying up properties on courthouse steps at prices that regular folks can no longer afford. And even though there's this issue around housing being a commodity, we all know that one of the old time ways that working class folks would supplement their income when they were in a position to might be to buy a second home and rent that out, right? And so that kind of working class ethic of like, I'm building my wealth, I got a second home I'm renting out to somebody down the block or someplace else, and it's supplementing my income to providing somebody with a good home. Even that form of sort of a ethic is now leaving that market, and it's strictly around who has the most money to buy the most property at once so that they can do bigger things with it. And so it's the further commodification of housing and property. And housing, obviously, in the United States has never been thought about as a human right or something that we deserve just because we're born. It's something that strictly becomes this commodification of like, we have to sell it at the higher price, buy it at whatever at the highest price, we fix it up to sell it again, to move again. And I think that type of sort of ethic, capitalist ethic, pervades the housing market. And it partly, again, is getting us back to this sort of rush in uptick again in housing prices and rents that, again, is fueling the gentrification, the subtle colonialism, the ethnic cleansing, right? That all of that, which is basically now, what we sometimes wrap up in simpler terms of saying that gentrification.
So Kamal's an attorney, so I'm gonna basic that down for the regular people who, because when he speaks, and so you do this, Egberto, too, you bring in like 5 different topics, and it's very complicated with very big words. So let's break this down a bit. I have to do this a lot in real estate. You touched on a lot. The reason I brought up the gentrifier colonizer parallel is because the face of it, I see people commenting sometimes. We had a groundbreaking ceremony the other day here. I sent it to you, Egberto. And our mayor, Keisha Lance Bottoms, who's a Biden pick and favorite, a Democratic darling, I guess, said it's all about planning. And so when Kamal brings up, the targeting of communities, the truth is that is facilitated through our planning. And, Kamal and myself have been witness to these real estate for-profit tours run by City Hall. And at the same time, these for-profit tours that brought in, all these companies and developers and so on, there were no protections on the legacy residents. In fact, they weren't even warned. And so it's very strange, and odd to see someone like Keisha Lance Bottoms stating a comment like it's all about planning, yet they've planned so poorly. And our commissioner, Tim Keene, is still gainfully employed, even though he was responsible for that. So when you bring up BlackRock, right, which is a huge company on Wall Street, a hedge fund that buys up real estate, and it's important too to note that they usually buy the low-hanging fruit, which is the single-family home entry, right? So that's why when you're seeing all these articles about people not being able to get into the market, first-time homeowners, that is why. But please don't be confused in the same way about gentrifier or colonizer and the face of it, because the truth is that Redfin, Zillow, Compass, and I know I'm in real estate, all of these companies are allowed to operate in dual capacity and buy direct from the public. And in my opinion, it's an ethics issue. And Kamal, we've discussed this before. In fact, Kamal's organization, just to ensure that locals, legacy residents, were included in the planning process, which is in Atlanta, it's called the NPU, the Neighborhood Planning Unit. He wrote a petition so that basically at the basic level, there's a neighborhood association, and that is who's officially recognized by City Hall as the voice of that community. But we have a lot of our neighborhood associations in Atlanta allowed to charge monetary dues. And in essence, it's a way to keep poor people out of the planning process. And Atlanta hasn't changed that. So we have this mayoral election coming up. Everyone's talking about housing, right? And who foots the brunt of affordable housing when we allow companies like BlackRock, Redfin, Zillow, private investors to dictate how the market's going to work? The taxpayers. And that's why these taxes are going up. And that's why City Hall's allowing it. But no one in the mayoral race who are running, Andre Dickens, Felicia Moore, who's the broker, Kasim Reed, is discussing regulating the real estate industry. Not one.
If I jump in real quick. And, I just want to say one thing about why they're not. It's not poor planning. It is the plan, right? So these things that happen they're not accidents. They're not, oh, we forgot. They're not, this is just some unfortunate consequence of policy. This is the actual policy that is dictated by these city officials hand in hand with these corporate developments. So these are not accidents. This is something that's planned, as this is what development means for them. You know, in addition, when we talk about Atlanta as supposedly a Black Mecca, so what we're really saying is that under the Black leadership, which has been here for 40 to 50 years, Atlanta has gone from over 60% Black to now in the latest census tract, dipping below 50% Black. And that's because these Black elected officials have, again, worked hand in hand with these corporate elites to decide what Atlanta will look like and who Atlanta is for. So Atlanta is slowly turning into San Francisco and Seattle, which means working class people, Black or white or otherwise, are being priced out of living in Atlanta. That poor people are being priced out of living in Atlanta. That legacy residents are being priced out of living in Atlanta. So there's a whole group of people, cross-section of groups and people who can no longer afford to live in Atlanta because only a middle class, sort of managerial class of folks who work for these larger corporations are now, or this city is now being built around helping them move into Atlanta directly so they can get to their jobs easier, and making other people pushed out who they feel can no longer afford what the new Atlanta looks like.
I want to, before Robby comes in, just a quick thing here, because Robby said it right when she said that the mayor talked about planning. And I think you reiterated that, Mr. Franklin, when you say that it was planned. And I want to just give a sort of a national scope to this. Everybody wonders why a group of people in this country always is, they're always left behind. Many times it is because of the face of the leaders of the face of those same people that betray them. And when we realize that, then I think we can make the necessary changes.
But to your point, Egberto, and to Kamal's point too, that is part of the plan. Because
right.
People are disarmed
Yes.
when you feel as though, you know, there's something called wholesaling, and I want to make sure that we stay focused on Kamal's group, even though the work is integral, obviously, to what he's doing for this particular show or interview. But there's something called wholesaling, right? And this isn't being addressed at all. These are non-licensed people going around, and unfortunately, they are in bed to some degree with agents, with realtors. You know, I'm one firm, so it doesn't really matter if I don't do it. But what you see often with the wholesalers is that wholesalers tend to be of the demographic of the target community. So, for example, if it's on the South Side, it's going to, in Atlanta, in Miami, they might be Latin. In Atlanta, they're going to be Black. And what that is done purposely. I have seen Caucasian brokers place wholesalers in between as middlemen to obtain that property. It's a straw buyer, it's an assignment contract, because the people are less on alert when they see someone who looks like them approaching them to purchase their home.
Right.
So it's, and this is no different, you know, with politics. So you see like the president now of the Atlanta Beltline, which is really a sidewalk, you know, that we funded through taxes and APS. Clyde Higgs is an African-American man who is the president. Well, he's new, you know, and you see this over and over and over, and people get so confused about what's happening to them, but it's really not their fault, because when you look at media, which is why I'm so grateful about the show, we're being fed a narrative. If you watch that Southside Trail opening Beltline video, it sounds great. It sounds absolutely great. But when you get into the reality of what is occurring in communities like Pittsburgh, you see the need on why the organization Community Movement Builders and the need for independent Black power media to tell their own narrative and story, to say we have to be included in planning. And the truth is, it comes at a cost. Kamal, you brought up two things I definitely want to make sure we discuss. One, you said the targeting and the planning. How is agency, specifically like code enforcement, can you give an example, because I think you have one, used against legacy residents and or organizations to target and dismantle kind of a movement, kind of pushing back?
Sure. I mean, in two ways. One, when you talk about a movement, in particular, our organization, part of the work that we do around the issue of gentrification is really being in people's space, right? And so we have a community house, and we have a beautiful mural painted on the side of that community house, which is basically saying, protect the Black community, stop gentrification from happening. And recently, code enforcement was called on us to write us a citation, a criminal citation, saying that our mural obviously was against the law. And so, you know, we put a public pressure campaign because this is our house, and under the criminal code, we commissioned the mural, so it's our mural. There is no violation of the law. There's no HOA, housing association. There's no fees. This is a regular home that we purchased, that we own, and we have a right to decorate that home as we see fit. And so the city had to back down from the issuance of that citation, but only after public pressure was put on them, and this became something that we put on social media that folks got to see and check out. In addition to the last point that you made about sort of the identity similarities between those pushing something, there's also a political identity, which is often the same, of the folks who are at the forward end of gentrification, right? And what I mean by that is, you know, the gentrification is happening in these so-called liberal cities, right? These liberal cities, which are supposed to have the interest, again, who on their platform put forth that they are siding with, they are supporting, again, working class folks, folks of color, poor folks. But it is these liberal cities across the country. You know, I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York, right? So it's across the country that gentrification is taking hold. So at the same time, you have folks talking about stopping climate change and representing different large national issues. These folks are, again, allowing, working with, supporting these large corporations and these local big corporations to push housing prices outside the barriers, housing and rental prices outside the barriers of what working class and poor people can afford. And then they just shrug their shoulders like it's outside of their control, where you are the political apparatus, right? You can do, and usually in these cities, the largest landowner is the city itself.
Right.
So the city itself can develop affordable housing. It can develop land trusts. It can think of alternative ways to put the brakes on gentrification, but it chooses not to because it's decided that the resources that they get as individuals and the love of shiny new objects is far more important than keeping a city affordable, working class, and attainable for people, as opposed to bringing in these shiny new objects vis-a-vis the Beltline, these new townhomes, these condos, these expensive homes, these large corporate developments, which are told to us to be progress, even if progress means that it's pushing poor and working class people outside the city.
It's progress. You got to go. It's progress. You got to go. Well, you know, again, you bring up a lot, but I want to tie things in, and we have about 3 more questions, and I think they're going to tie everything together in a poem. I really want people to understand and reach the conclusion themselves that the lack of inclusive development, which your organization, Community Movement Builders, is in the streets, you know, in a very different way, fighting for and creating awareness around. And sometimes with the murals, you got to kind of wake people up, like shake them a little bit, like, hey, you know, sometimes that's the only way, instead of having this kind of mild, like, can you see our point of view? Can you ask? Because I trust me, I tried that for 3 years. Can you try to understand? You know, I'll eat the piece of pound cake, I'll attend the meetings you want, but can you try to understand how these people would feel? But that didn't work. So it's very important, not only the matter in which you're kind of handling this, right, from a place of strength, but the other component is that your organization, you as an attorney, actually can defend. So when that happened with code enforcement, you were able to explain a legal argument and have the city back up. Because I remember in Pittsburgh before, years back, there was a mural commissioned, and it was put up, it looked like a giant serpent on a wall. And the community of Pittsburgh, which is predominantly African-American, predominantly lower working class, very Christian oriented to a degree, had a fit about that mural up on their wall. And all the gentrifiers came out and said, it's art, it's art. And I point that out because of the hypocrisy the hypocrisy, and these same gentrifiers have Black Matter signs in front of their home. So but their same gentrifiers have pay those monetary dues and allow for people to be excluded out of the city engagement. The other component, the last thing I want to ask you about before we wrap up, is you mentioned besides the code enforcement being targeted and folks being displaced, specifically lower income Black people out of Atlanta, the quote unquote Mecca, and them losing social networks. When our youth have to leave and see their family's property out on the street, in evictions, and have to leave homes that they've rented for generations because they didn't have the ability to buy due to redlining, and they have to start in different schools, or they're out selling water. How do you see that as a correlation in crime? Because crime is a huge topic right now in the city, including this cop city, this big, massive development that they're putting money into police departments for. Can you talk just a bit about that?
So as we know, gentrification has several drivers, and part of those drivers are the actual use of the police against, what we may call the indigenous population, right? The use of military force, the use of criminality or criminalizing people so that you can arrest, harass, relocate people outside of their neighborhoods. So, again, being from Brooklyn, New York, I was as a practicing attorney, I worked on a federal lawsuit, a class action lawsuit around what was called stop and frisk, and how Black youth in particular were targeted by the police for stop and frisk in numbers far outstretching any potential criminality or so-called breaking of crime, which means that they were targeted because of their race. That's a system that in some ways is nationalized, right? Communities of color are over-policed, they're over-ticketed, they're overstopped, they're over-arrested, obviously over-convicted and given longer sentences. And this is partly how gentrification works, to start targeting these communities, having these people move out, protecting the white gentrifiers. And you spoke about the gentrification, the gentrifiers themselves. And that's part of the dichotomy, is that the gentrifiers who, they think of themselves as lovely people, and some of them may be lovely people, but when they come, they're not coming to share a community. The instincts are that they're coming to take over a community and to displace a community. And so again, another quick short story in Harlem, there was a famous, in Harlem, there's a park called Morningside Park, euphemistically referred to as Marcus Garvey Park, where every Sunday you would have African drummers for literally a decade who would perform in the park. And that was sort of a spiritual practice for folks in Harlem to either gather or hear the drums. As gentrification proceeded, new towers were built, condos, the new white neighbors started to complain to the police about the drumming so that they can have the drumming stopped, right? So their input into the community was that the quote unquote indigenous culture, the lifestyle, all of that had to go to make things what we consider to be safer. And lastly, I'll say, no one says that poor neighborhoods are some paradise. Poor neighborhoods need resources, right? But people still have social networks that they depend upon, that they live through. But the issue is, who should have the power to make the change and development that these neighborhoods need? Should it be the people downtown? Should it be the real estate developers? Should it be the big corporate hierarchy? Or should it be the people themselves who are in need of the resources, in need of new development that fits their needs as a community, as opposed to having development that pushes them out?
Kamau, I want to thank you. Egberto, I want to thank you because I'm hoping that this interview and discussion with you and dialogue will awaken some people. I hope it will spark some folks, especially our gentrifiers who have the influence, to ask themselves, should I be supporting holistic development? Should I be more aware? Should we have walk-in community centers in every 3-mile radius in these divested communities for legacy residents, because they have been damaged, and need assistance beyond what I've received in my life. We can level things out and not incur the cost, the capital costs and the human costs, by supporting organizations that support people on the ground, and that would be your organization. Community Movement Builders, Black Power Media, who support holistic development, who are the voice of the people. You're doing the work, but obviously we have to support you. So I beg people to go to your Twitter, your site, visit the house, disagree when people are harassing the organization at the level, or do not participate in it. Say, no, I don't condone the harassment of anti-gentrification organizations who are doing quality work. So Egberto, thank you, bro. Thank you for making this happen.
Thank you for doing the show, Robby. I think this is exceptional. And for brother Kamal Franklin, I've always been a fan. Thank you so kindly for what you are doing in your community. That is reflected all over.
We have several events coming up, including on the 21st, we're going to have an event at Morehouse to talk about the issue of gentrification here in Atlanta, Morehouse College, to talk about the issue of gentrification and over-policing, and actually Morehouse's support for some of the policing activities which are impacting not only their students, but the surrounding Black community that they've been a part of.
What is the best way for people to get to you and help you? Give us one specific link that's a catch-all.
Best link is communitymovementbuilders.org, which is our website. People can find out about our work, and people can also contact us directly to learn how to get involved or how to support us. And we have a donation page and all the rest of it.
I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I want to thank Kamal for making time for us and speaking so plainly and being so brave and bold. I'm very grateful. It gives me hope for what's going to happen. I think the work that he's doing and the work that Egberto is doing is changing things. And I want to thank Egberto for making this happen. And especially I want to thank the Politics Done Right posse for watching, tuning in. Please, please, please share, and please go to the Community Movement Builders site and support their efforts.
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed that. Robby is a community activist out there in Atlanta. I don't know if you guys remember that she did several stories for us, including the one where she did Tyler Perry's studio being built in the neighborhood, and many of the people in the neighborhood, which was an underprivileged neighborhood, could not really partake of the spoils that came out of Tyler Perry's doing. So she does a whole lot of good work in Atlanta, both as a real estate agent or real estate expert agent. I don't know all the different permutations of real estate, as well as other things. Before we get started, we're past the halfway mark of the show, so you know what time it is. It is time for me to say, guys, I would appreciate if you will support the program. How can you support the program? If you are listening on YouTube, you can go ahead and click on that join button and become a part of our YouTube posse by clicking join and becoming a member of our YouTube channel. You can also, if you're not on YouTube, if you're on some other network, you can actually just go to politicsdoneright.com/YouTube. That is politicsdoneright.com/YouTube, which I just placed in the field. Alternatively, you can support us on Patreon. We want 1,000 members on Patreon and 1,000 members on the other one on YouTube. So please go ahead and consider as well going to politicsdoneright.com/Patreon. Let me tell you, some people have done half and half. They said, "Oh, I want to give membership on both of them," and they'll give half on politics, half on YouTube, the politicsdoneright.com/YouTube, and half on Patreon. Alternatively, we always like PayPal, so you can always go to PayPal and provide a support on PayPal. You can either do one time or monthly, however you choose. You can support us by purchasing our books. How do you purchase our books? Just go to politicsdoneright.com/books, politicsdoneright.com/books, and you can also support us by going to our store and getting t-shirts, all that good stuff. And how do you do that? Go to politicsdoneright.com/store, politicsdoneright.com/store. And since I have all these different links that show how you can support our program, I have a catch-all where it has all the different methods of support, and you can do that by going to politicsdoneright.com/support, politicsdoneright.com/support. So I thank you guys for always being there for me. I want you to know that we are now, for the time being, we are out of DC. I'm in the small apartment of my daughter in DC. As you guys know, I'm taking care of my daughter who has suffered a second stroke, but she is on the mend and she is going to do fine. And we are going to make sure that she comes back 100% and finish her medical training and all that good stuff. I told her the sky remains the limit no matter what, because, you know, we are a village together. So you guys are the ones who made it possible for us to have the same quality of show, if it's even a bit more difficult to do because of space constraints. You all have been responsible for new equipment that allowed us to do this. So to the PDR posse, to family members and friends, I want to thank you for being the ones that allowed, in as much as I have to do this new task, for Politics Done Right to go forward in a professional manner that it has always been. Julie Henderson says, so happy to hear your daughter is doing better. Bless your family. Thank you so kindly. Nanette Birdsmith says, Team Ashley. Thank you, Courtney. Give her love to Ashley. And so I thank you guys. Puffin says, blessings to Ashley and all your family. Egberto, muchas gracias. Okay, let's continue with the program. But the depth of thankfulness in the heart from the village, again, like I said, the PDR posse family and friends, it gives me the constant hope in everything I believe in. When I tell you most people are good, and there are few infected apples that get into the barrel that tries to change that. Don't allow it. Most people are good. Whether they are left-wingers, right-wingers, or otherwise, most people are good. Maywood will give your love to Ashley. I want you all to remember that. I never believed that for a long time. And it didn't take this. I saw the empathy in many other situations with many other people, for many other folk. And then I understood that it was a system. It was a system that needed to keep us at each other's throats. That was really the problem in society today. Okay, anyway, enough of my pontificating. So let's go ahead. Texas is trying to change history. Do you doubt me? I want you to listen to this story or watch this story. If you're on podcast, listen to this story, and then we'll take it on the other side. A society that refuses to understand history, a society that refuses history, a society that thinks it can change history, is a society that will die. And that is where we're starting to edge here in America. I want you to listen to this as it is concerning, but more than concerning, it is bewildering. Check this out.
A disturbing story out of South Lake, Texas, just outside of Dallas, where a top school administrator at a local school district advised teachers if they have a book about the Holocaust in their classroom, they should also offer students access to a book from an opposing perspective, the Holocaust. That is according to an audio recording obtained by NBC News.
Wes Frierson, a parent of 2 daughters in South Lake, is uncertain about his kids' education.
With some of the local politics right now, I'm not sure that teachers feel supported.
The district already in the spotlight after parents clashed over its diversity plan, now facing new pushback over which books are allowed in their libraries, with some teachers placing caution tape over bookshelves, calling the move censorship. It all started when a 4th grade teacher was reprimanded after a parent complained about her having a book about anti-racism.
I couldn't believe it. She's the kind of teacher that we would hope the district would be trying to attract.
The district sent educators new guidance to vet all books, instructing them to not allow singular perspectives that could be considered offensive. This coming after Texas passed a law banning the teaching of concepts that could make individuals feel guilt or anguish due to their race. NBC News obtained exclusive, secretly recorded audio of a school training.
We are in the middle of a political mess.
The director of curriculum, Gina Petty, offers an example for teachers. Balance books about the Holocaust with an opposing view.
Make sure that if you have a book on the Holocaust, that you have one that has opposing, that has other.
How do you oppose the Holocaust? Gina Petty did not respond to messages requesting comment. I met with 2 concerned teachers in South Lake. We obscured their identities because they feared speaking out could cost them their jobs.
I was in such shock when I heard these words. We felt this was necessary because we felt like no one was going to listen until a teacher spoke up.
And it's not just in Southlake. Across the country, educators are facing new policies restricting how they can educate students about race, from Tennessee to Pennsylvania. Southlake School District told NBC News they were helping teachers comply with Texas law, and the district has not and will not mandate books be removed.
The district says that they have not told teachers to ban books, to completely shut down libraries. What are you seeing?
That's a lie. It is a flat out lie. How could you even make that statement?
What do you think is at stake here?
In books, children see what the world can be, and to have that taken away because we're afraid of a few parents getting upset about a word or two or an idea that they've imagined is in a book is unthinkable.
Wes Frierson says his daughters see what's happening.
Unfortunately, for kids of the age of mine, I think the last, as they become aware of the world, I think they just see the world as very highly politicized.
But parents hope that politics find a way out of public schools.
Antonia Hilton joins us now. Antonia, you have been covering the school district for months. Can you take us there? We are living in an age of misinformation. Where is this community in Texas? Do they not have access to facts?
Absolutely not. I mean, this is a community right outside of Dallas. This is a community with many college-educated folks, people who are executives at companies like American Airlines or Goldman Sachs. I mean, the types of folks that live in cosmopolitan communities all over the United States. But what we're seeing in places like Texas, and actually around the country as these laws are passing, while some are paying attention and trying to raise alarms about these laws, they're broad. And what we're seeing is that educators are extremely confused. And what that confusion leads to are conversations like the one you just heard transpire in that Southlake classroom.
Understand what's going on here. Most people in the world, most people in America are good people. Evil has been promoted, taught, and so forth by a few. Bad information has been inculcated in the minds of many. And what's happening is, as people are enlightened, they are not really concerned that people are going to feel depressed because of what their ancestors have done. That's not the real fear. The real fear is that when they learn the reality of what occurred in the past, they will support mitigation of what occurred. And here's the kicker. The problem is they will then also realize that we are all in the same boat and that it is a few who's using the angst between different groups to create friction to prevent those that are pilfering us all from getting together and demanding what's ours. It's all a plan. It's all detail. It's all underneath the layers. You see, it is all a plan, right? Here's the deal. Why, they're making it one believe that the reason they want to stop having these racial discussions in schools, etc., is that somehow it's going to make white kids feel bad, depressed, because they look like the villain. I don't know of anybody who really thinks that way, right? They didn't do anything. Anybody, irrespective of ethnicity or whatever, you can think of a relative, a friend, or something, an association that has done something wrong, right? And what do? You make sure you don't do it. But what they're scared of is that as we learn about what has occurred, and also learn that the true beneficiaries of all this evil was but a few, everybody then unites against those who have always perpetrated that evil. I want you to think about that. This isn't about scared about these people's feelings. If they were scared about how people felt, they would not be concerned about giving people the necessary health care that they need. Because health care affects everybody. They wouldn't be they wouldn't be all that concerned about doing all the right things. But they are. This is all intent on being scared that all Americans share the same information, the same truthful information base, because if that occurs, the conclusions of said enlightenment will be the same. And that is our current, not only economic system, our current socio-economic system, our current social economic construct, the way things are built, the way things operate would change, because we will all see things as they truly are, and not based on preconceived notion, preconceived misconceptions. You see, the puppeteer continues. The puppeteer is scared. The puppeteer knows that an enlightening America presents a problem. Roberto Luis, mi hermano de Panama, says, we all need one love. Yes, sir. And one love is Roberto Luis's call sign. We always end our conversation. Take care, my brother. Adios, hermano. One love. We are all soldiers fighting for humanity to be loved and respected. Tell my goddaughter we are so blessed and proud of her progress. Prayers is infinity. One love, Padrino. He's our godfather. That's Padrino. Luz, my daughter's godfather. And that is Padrino in Spanish. Anyhow, deep down, if you feel bad, change the future to not repeat history anymore. Who said that? Puffin, that was beautiful. Julie Henderson asked the right why they call indigenous people defending their land and culture as savages, because they defended their land and culture against somebody who wanted to take it. What else have we got here? Para ver, Fonsui. Welcome aboard, Fonsui. Democracy falls one citizen at a time. Each person who stands aside or doesn't act because they need to get theirs or even just get by is one more blow to freedom. Man, I got some poets out here. Fonsui, me gusta eso. That was beautiful, Fonsui. Let's see. Let me get up to the top now. Julie Henderson says, ask the right how many slaves were brought to the New World from Europe as slaves in chains. Exactly. Para ver, Puffin says, beautiful, Fonsui as well. World peace, respect all, from Julie Henderson. We also have Maywood, who says, I simply don't understand how you can have a different perspective on the Holocaust. You cannot. But again, remember, we will not be replaced. Remember the marching in Virginia. We will not be replaced. I was sold on old car. I'll buy a book, thanks, but my books too. The Art of Betrayal by God and the Book of Judas. Hey, I don't think you sent me information to promote your book, I'm assuming. PDR mission statement inspires and brims with goodwill. Worth reading. It's first thing you see. politicsdoneright.com/support. Thank you so kindly for your support, E2247. Let's see what Julie Henderson says. Defaulting to public services creates a prison for custodial parent and child. We also have Courtney, the SLP says, Howard University students are currently boycotting gentrification as we speak. That's my daughter's university, where she is in med school. She only had 3 months to go and the stroke hit. But like I tell her, pause, but we move on. Kimberly Mitchell, there is one where this is where the narrative comes in to make it our moral imperative to meet these demands without complaint. This is what will be called good character. And you know what Politics Done Right is filled with? People with good character. Please, folks, remember to share these programs. Please, folks, remember to promote the show. Most of our show is seen on podcasts. Nanette Bird-Smith, thank you. Most of our show is seen on podcasts, but I'd love to build a larger live audience. We're kind of in transition now because we just moved from 3 o'clock to noon. When my daughter comes back to the apartment, based on how we're going to do our exercising and schedule, etc., I would decide if this show has to remain at noon, go to 3, or maybe some other time. But I tell you what, I would love for all of you to chime in. Send somebody create a page or something, or if you want to just send me an email suggesting times that you would prefer to see Politics Done Right in the order that you'd like to see. Like, my first choice will be 3, my second choice will be noon, my third choice will be something like that. And remember to put the time zone in there, because we have people that span all time zones and all countries. So we'd like to hear that as well. Julie Henderson says, eliminate prejudice, equal court cases should be prosecutor X and defendant Y. Identification creates prejudice. Yes. Puffin says, very good advice. Pause, then move on. Egberto, no hurry. All good things in all good time. Jerry Garcia from the Grateful Dead. Yeah. So, folks, let's continue. Let's see. We are near the end of the program, and like I always do, I do one last ask. So I will do one last ask. Please consider becoming a part of our PDR posse via YouTube by becoming a YouTube member. We have thousands of YouTube subscribers. We'd love some of you to be converted into members. Please go ahead and go to politicsdoneright.com/YouTube or click on that join button. Alternatively, you can become a patron, which is just as good. We try to keep our giving on different platforms in case one crashes or whatever. Politicsdoneright.com/patron. Patron is spelled Patreon. Politicsdoneright.com/patron. Alternatively, you can also support us at PayPal, politicsdoneright.com/PayPal. You can either do it on a one-time basis, or PayPal now has the ability to say, I want to do this little bit every month, as well as support us by buying our books. Our books, I can tell you, ask anybody who's bought it if they liked it. politicsdoneright.com/books, politicsdoneright.com/books. And you can then support us. You can find all our methods of support at politicsdoneright.com/support. Of course, I kept the GoFundMe open for the equipment. You guys made it past the limit. Anything that goes in there, help us defray other costs. Thank you so kindly, folks, for always being there for Politics Done Right. I couldn't do this new venture. You know, I left my software company for an altruistic reason, but we were able to do this. And again, I couldn't do it without you. Rose says, you have to really wonder, when my dad was in the army, he saw Nuremberg trials. This video is Dine Onanga Kobul. I'll check it out. But anyhow, folks, I've got to get out of here. I want to thank you guys so kindly for being a part of Politics Done Right. My name is Egberto Willies, and you know how I end this baby. I am what? Out! Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, unlike mainstream media beholden to corporations, we only owe allegiance to you. Remember, you can also send me a tweet at EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right.